Hello, I'm back after clearing up some memory problems. We're on question 4 out of the 5-question final exam. Illustrate a monopoly model and show the effect of a decline in production costs on monopoly price and quantity. Now do the same for a perfectly competitive firm and compare the effect, right? So this is the 4 questions here. So as we look at a monopolist, we begin with always the axis of price and quantity. We draw a demand curve, and then as I illustrated earlier, the marginal revenue curve, which is just the demand curve twice as steep, same intercept twice as steep. And then we draw the first cost curves, right? Average total cost with marginal cost striking through the minimum of the average total cost curve. Now, a decline in production costs would see the average total cost lower and the marginal cost lower at each point. So the original equilibrium is, recall, you always set as a monopolist marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so you set your marginal revenue to marginal cost. That's where you produce. Your price is here at the demand curve and down at the bottom of the minimum average total cost. So that blue, or in this case, blue overlaid with purple area, is the profitability for the monopolist before the cost cut. We do the same thing after the cost cut. We set marginal revenue equal marginal cost to set our production. We price at the demand curve, right? And we have cost at the average total cost curve there. That gives us the profitability for the monopolist, right? So you can see their big profits in both places. Now let's go to the perfectly competitive firm. Now, the difference here is the perfectly competitive firm has a demand curve and marginal revenue curve are the same. So I have demand curves that are flat. There's the original one, and it's always going to move. The demand and cost will adjust, right? Because there'll be entrance here. So demand for individual firms drops as entrance occurs, and entrances occurs because there's profit to be made. And if there's no profit, entrance ends. If profit is negative, firms exit. So in a perfectly competitive firm, we see the cost cut means that this firm will, at a new price, would otherwise have a profit of this level, except that firms will perceive that profit opportunity, enter so that the individual profit opportunity, the market share of that individual firm drops, and so they're down to the new minimum of the average total cost, exhausting the competitive profit. So the point here, and this is hard for a lot of students to understand because you're oftentimes so focused on the definition of cost as just pure accounting costs, not keeping in mind that some payment to the entrepreneur, the person who organizes production, is part of the cost. And so in a competitive market, that gets exhausted by entrants. You have just normal profits. And that normal profits vary by industry. But to give you some sense of what normal profits would be, Walmart has had 3 to 4% profits each year since 1969. If her profits got much higher, then they would have competitors in there. If their profits got lower, people would would no longer invest in them. And so that's a normal profit for them. If you look at the profit for an oil company, it's going to be much higher simply because there's so much more volatility from year to year. So in a good year, an oil company may make 15%, on a bad year, -3%. And so there are inter-industry differences in profitability that you have to consider. So again, on this final exam, what I'm looking for is straightforward explanation of the statistical tools that we have learned, right? You have in your possession a textbook that explains these, that gives you an explanation of what the error terms are in a regression, and gives you an explanation of what a coefficient does, how to back that out and estimate it. These will have different meanings in different classes for you in the MBA program. You just need to be able to do this functionally and then listen closely to the professor. So when they're explaining a T statistic or an F statistic or a Z statistic, you know what that means, that that's a signal to noise ratio. And the economics, you have to understand the market models. You have to understand the role of elasticity, supply and demand, and the difference between perfectly competitive and monopolistic model. In economic research, we do thousands of these market models, right? They're ranging from the most restrictive, which are the monopolists, to the the biggest number of firms which are competitive. And if you understand that, it's fairly easy to walk through the portion of this that you're doing in class. And with that, I'm going to stop recording and upload these. Good luck with your final exam.